So last week I shared the story of Jacob and Esau. They're his twins that were born to Rebekah and Isaac. It's a blessed event that happened after 20 years of trying, but in an ominous sign, these twins began fighting with each other even while they were still in the womb, and it was so bad that Rebekah complained, "Why should I still live?" Jacob was born trying to get ahead of his brother, even grasping onto Esau's heel to get ahead of him while they were going down the birth canal. And he never stopped trying to get ahead of his older brother. But having failed in the womb, Jacob, as adults, tricked Esau into giving him his birthright for the price of some stew. And some years later, Jacob once again tricked Esau out of his rightful place as the head of the tribe. And Jacob did this by conspiring with his mother Rebekah to deceive his father Isaac. It's a wild story, and it's as good as any soap opera can write. And if you want to catch up with where we were last week, find my sermon or watch it. And so today's reading begins right after Jacob has been tricked again by his twin. And he's so angry. Esau is so angry. He promises to kill Jacob, but he'd wait to do it until their father was dead. But before that happened, Rebekah sent her favorite twin off to live with her brother Laban. And jumping ahead in the story, if you were here last week, that's where he met Laban's daughters and was tricked into marrying both of them, which then, in retaliation, Jacob schemed to steal his uncle's sheep. So my colleague Jeffrey Spencer describes Jacob as one who puts the fun in dysfunctional. So today's story happens at the end of that first day of running from Esau's murderous rage. And Jacob was so dog-tired, he simply used a rock as a pillow and fell into a deep sleep. You know, the kind that with dreams so convoluted that you're tired when you wake up? Ever have those? Yeah, my worst dreams are of being late to something. More than once I've had a dream that I forgot my sermon at home. I realize it in time to think I can run home and get it, but by the time I finally get back, after this and that and everything happened, by the time I finally came back, you were all so angry you went home. Running, can't get here. And Jacob was running for his life when he laid his head on that rock and fell into a deep sleep. And a fascinating dream. This dream is the source of the famous spiritual we've all heard, "We are climbing Jacob's ladder," except in that case, the dream was of the enslaved escaping to heaven. That's not Jacob's dream. In his dream, he saw God's messengers going busily up and down like office workers on what we might envision as a Mayan temple. But the original audience would have imagined ziggurats in Babylon. God's messengers busily going up and down, sharing messages. There's one more. It's not exactly Jacob's ladder. But you think, wait, Jacob wouldn't have known what a Babylonian ziggurat was, right? Babylon was hundreds and hundreds of years later. What's that doing in his dream? Well, the book of Genesis was compiled during the Babylonian exile, full of stories the people had carried with them for generations. All of them true stories, except that probably none of them actually happened, right? They were pieces of stories that were sewn together like a patchwork quilt. Remember in school having to diagram sentences? Ugh. Yeah. Add the subject and predicate, start with a simple subject, verb, phrase, independent clause, modifiers. Ugh. Sorry to all the English teachers in the room. I hated doing that. But I hated doing it as much in seminary when we had to diagram Bible passages. We had to disassemble that patchwork quilt, and we used letters like J and D and P to delineate which paragraph or story belonged to which tradition and what era it had been written. But once you could see what came from where, you could understand the why, the agendas and purposes of each group that contributed to that patchwork quilt. And at first, that kind of deconstruction was disturbing. I remember going to 17 years of Sunday school and being blissfully ignorant about the Bible and got really angry at my first college Old Testament professor because I wasn't prepared for Dr. Wilterdink to say that the Bible is mythological. It took me a while to calm down. He wasn't saying the Bible's a bunch of fairy tales, but that it's not history. The Bible is true, or rather contains truth, and I can even say it's the Word of God, but it's not factual, because it wasn't meant to be. There's stories passed down from generation to explain who we are and why things happened. And in this story, for example, one question might be when they're standing at this place, why is this rock so special? And so a story is told about our ancestor Jacob and the time he was escaping from his brother and used this rock as his pillow and turned it into a sacred pillar. The story also functions as a transition to explain how it is he came to marry his 4 wives and how he came to be the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. Except that it's not the only story of how he came to meet his cousin wives. Because in the chapter immediately before this one, patchwork quilt put together, a different story is told that the reason Jacob went off to live with Uncle Laban is because Isaac and Rebekah couldn't stand the wives of Esau. Rebekah said to Esau, "I'm sick to death of these Hittite women. And if Jacob also marries a native Hittite woman, why should I continue to live?" She had a dramatic streak in her, didn't she? The same thing she said about the twins in the womb. But anyway, in this version, Jacob is sent off to find a wife. He's not running away, escaping Esau. So which is the true story? Well, truth is found in the meaning of it, right? Not in the history. And so after all the dissembling and the diagramming, it makes sense why this story was told in the Babylonian exile. During the exile, the Israelites were dragged from their homes. They were dragged from their homeland. They were dragged away from the temple where they worshiped God. And surely God was in that place. And they mourned, how can we sing the songs of Zion in Babylon? And in response, they told each other's stories, including the story of the patriarch Isaac and how at a time when he was utterly alone and afraid, running for his life, only had a rock for his pillow. He saw the connection of earth and heaven, and he woke up and he exclaimed, surely God is in this place. And hence, it's a true story that God is not limited to a particular place. It's a true story. Did it happen that way? Now, I love a good story about scandals and villains, and especially those soap opera twists, but ultimately the question is, where is the truth in this story for you? Because the real commission of the spiritual life is to explore these texts until they aren't just mythological stories about someone else, but words by which we can live our lives. You know, words for times, for example, when we also feel utterly alone, misunderstood or angry, afraid, times that we're trying to escape danger, even from family, times when it felt like all we had was a rock for a pillow. And in all those moments, asking, are we going to be okay? Are we going to be okay? Richard Rohr said, these are the places human beings hate to go, but it's the place God is always leading us. It's this in-between place between when you've left the tried and true and have not yet been able to replace it with anything else. We've had lots of times like that in our lives. And we'll still have more, right? Leaving a job before you've got a new one, or leaving a relationship before you found a new one. And it's that place that you surely knew God was real, but not in the same way anymore. It's even about leaving a church before you've found a new one. We can visit all kinds of churches that might make a great new home, but it's not the same, even though the same is what we had to leave for our health and sanity. As Rohr said, it's when you are between your old comfort and any new answer. And those are anxious times. And if you're not trained in how to hold anxiety and to live with ambiguity and how to trust and wait, you will keep running. That the spiritual life is learning how to hold anxiety and to live with ambiguity and to trust and wait. We find these in the stories of those who came before us. Because you know, Jacob wasn't on a vision quest. He wasn't setting out to have some great spiritual experience in the desert. He wasn't seeking anything but to save his own skin, right? He pushed his luck too far. He was running, and he was in a limbo he created of his own making. But that doesn't matter, because you realize that exactly that moment, God said, "Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go." God didn't chastise Jacob for all his dirty trick scoundrel's ways. God, in the moment when Jacob was most alone, afraid, and with a rock for a pillow, said, "I am with you. There's nothing you've done that means I am not with you." That's a true story. True for you somehow. So it's easy to say this is a beautiful sanctuary and surely God is in this place. But that dirty trick scoundrel Jacob, as well as the Babylonian exiles, learned that God is not limited to one time or place. It's just as true that God is with us, surely with us, in the desolate, isolated, forlorn, anxious, and ambiguous places of our lives. And if you can trust that, then you don't have to run anymore. So, searching for truth in this story and meaning, I also find encouragement to listen to our dreams. I love stories of dreamers and their weird dreams, because dreams often are just weird. But sometimes they are the way that the sacred and divine try to break through to share a message. And it might be a message to carry on. It might be a message that you're not alone. Maybe it's a message for when you find yourself between a rock and a hard place, knowing you had to leave something behind, but unsure about what you will find. But it's exactly there that God finds you. And you can turn that granite pillow into a pillar of gratitude. Amen.